Hello and welcome. My name is Joel and I'm delighted to be joined today by Rebecca and Charlie to get their perspective on investment, more precisely thought on retirement and personal investing. So although investing can feel a distant abstraction, very obscure, yet for most people in Western country, it isn't just an option, it's an obligation. For instance, people at working age generally have to contribute to pension savings. So we will discuss these topics, share experience, and also touch on ethical question around investment. But first, let's get started with some introduction to our speakers. So on to you, Rebecca.
Thank you, Joelle. So I'm Rebecca from Seawolf Sustainability Consulting. I'm from the UK, live in the Netherlands, and I have a background in banking and finance, and I'm a chartered accountant, now working in sustainability consulting. Over to you, Charlie.
Charlie,
you're muted.
Starting well. Hi both, thanks for having me. I'm Charlie from Paris, France, and I've studied a master's in management with a specialization in finance. And I have about 7 years of working in sustainable finance, of which the last year was with you guys at Seawolf, and together with another organization called Topo Finance, for which we measured the bank's climate impact. And on top of that, I've also been lecturing an ESG class at my ex-school, which is called Grenoble-École de Management.
Thank you very much for the intro. Shortly on me, so I'm Joel Aymon, I'm Director and Founder of Seawolf Sustainability Consulting. And for background, I also have been working in banking for about 14 years in the group finance department, so finance role. And I've been now helping in the last 3 years corporates and institutions with their financial management and consulting on sustainable finance. Before we start that conversation, just a small disclaimer. So we're not financial advisor, and we do not aim with the podcast to provide financial advice. We rather provide some reflection and thought about how some investment works, some consideration if you planning or are looking to do more investments. And so that said, let's start with a few questions. So one of the key questions, as I mentioned, many people will have to contribute to pension or will plan to save money for their retirement. So maybe starting with you, Rebecca, how does retirement investing actually work in your country?
Yeah, thank you for the question and just sharing some personal perspectives. So in the UK, for me, all of my pensions have been company pensions, and they've all been defined contribution. So that means I contribute, or my employer contributes, or both of us, a particular amount each year. It's not a defined benefit. So the benefit at the end is not defined, but rather a DC, a defined contribution. Also, because I had a few employers, it meant I had quite a number of different pension pots with all different companies. Most of them are on the default. So the whatever the company chose, either my employer or former employer. So one of the things that I did in the last 10 years was to consolidate all of those corporate pensions. So they're all in one place with one provider. Also in the UK, you have a state pension. But in all honesty, I'm in my 40s. I very much doubt it's going to be there in a significant form by the time I'm lucky enough to retire. So with that consolidated pension pot, what I do is firstly make sure the providers are all UN, United Nations Principles of Responsible Investment signatories. So that's a minimum, if you like. They're members of UNPRI. And there's a list on the UNPRI website where you can look at those funds. Also, and the names of the providers. Also, I look to see if they're members of different alliances. So, for example, the Net Zero Asset Managers Alliance. And for all of my pensions on the corporate side, my personal pensions, they all have ESG integrated. So what that means is environment, social, and governance considerations integrated. So they're pretty traditional, but they have that layer where environment, social, and governance has been considered, and the pension providers have engaged with the companies where there are shares or debt in the pension, and they do that on a routine basis with an impact report, which I also review. So for my pension, fairly traditional in a consolidated pot, look to see that it's a UNPRI member, and then also ESG integrated. I'll leave
Rebecca,
it there.
I was curious to know, out of the ESG alphabet soup that we're served, there's plenty of frameworks. Why UNPRI in particular?
Yeah, and you're right. There's a lot of frameworks. It can get very confusing and lots of acronyms. For me, for UNPRI in particular, it's global, and the pensions and the asset managers that I use are global. So it includes investments in the US, in Asia, in various other places. So I think that's one global benchmark. There are other standards which are stronger. So I do look to see if it's possible to use some of those standards. But for me, it's really the fact that it's a global standard. People know what it is. I can talk to my pension provider about it, and it has publicly available reports which I can see online. So I guess ease of access and the fact that it's global.
Makes sense. Thanks.
How about you, Charlie? What about in France? And for you, how do you think about pensions?
So I'd say first, it's quite different in France, the way it works, because we have a mandatory system. Then whether this mandatory system is financially sustainable or not is a big question we have right now, because we have more and more retirees, and there's really this question of how can you pay for it? How can you finance it? Because the way it works is it's called a pay-as-you-go system, a pay-go. There are similar systems, for instance, in the US, Social Security. The German system is also functioning the same way. And we have a base of current workers who are monthly paying for the retirees' pensions. So this works if there is a good equilibrium, but as the basis of current workers is shrinking compared to the basis of retirees, there's really the question of its long-term sustainability. And the way it works, to put it very simply, there's plenty of different systems. Whether you are working for the government, for instance, you will have a different pension scheme. But all in all, the way it works is that you get a payment which is capped at 40,000 euros per year, which corresponds to 50% of your 25 highest paid years. The problem is, as I was telling you, is this system is not fully financially sustainable, and so more and more people are looking into non-mandatory retirement options. This being first, real estate investment. The people in France, the culture of investment is not that strong, and the primary option, is going to be your main residence, and that's what people are going to focus on. There's of course some exceptions of people who won't buy and decide to invest it all in financing vehicles, but 60% of French savings are on the real estate sector, namely their primary residence. And on that side, it's quite a constrained market, so people don't really look at the impact. And as for the pay-go system, there's also no considerations over impact because of the way it works. You don't have investment as such. And for your primary residence, most of the time you're only looking at the price per meter square. You're not really looking at, is it sustainable? How was it made? Is it made of wood? We don't have plenty of options on that front. One thing that we do look at though is the kilowatt hour per meter square per year, the energy efficiency performance. It's called DPE. That's something we look at. There's also some labels such as BPOS, which ensures that a building is energy positive. And then there's also for certain people an alternative route, which is doing their own house, building their own house using natural elements like wood, straw, mud, and lime, but that may be 0.01% of the French population. So that being said, those are the two primary components of someone's retirement, the pay-as-you-go system and their real estate investment. And then 40% of the what's left is the financial investments, which is divided in 3 equal parts. There's 1/3 of saving accounts, mostly in France called Livret A and LDDS. They both finance social housing and energy efficiency projects. Then the second one is life insurance. So this is mostly funds and funds of funds. And then the third one is direct stakes in companies. So out of the 6,500 billion euros that the French consumer are investing, it's equally divided within those 3 categories that I just mentioned.
Excellent. Thank you, Charlie and Rebecca. I think the real estate investment, I think that's probably something common as well with the UK. And myself, I'm Swiss. Investing in your home is a large investment for people thinking of their retirement. Good. On to more the personal investment and whereas it relates to retirement or more in general in life, having investments to keep your money working. Maybe Rebecca, what has been your experience with personal investment a bit? When did you start? How did you start doing it? And maybe what have you invested in the past and now?
Yeah, thank you. And again, a good question. And I do recognize it's a luxury. And for some people, they don't have that option to invest and don't have disposable income. So certainly grateful I have that option. I think I first started, probably it was almost like 10 to 15 years ago. And it changes over time. For me, I think firstly with investment, it's the rule 101 of investing, diversification. So I have a few different pots of savings or investment money. Firstly, a savings account, and each month I'll set up a direct debit to just automatically go into a different savings account. So it's not sitting in my bank account, in my current account, and so I can't access that money. So I have that rainy day pot. And just to give a feeling, it'd be in the region of sort of 50 to 300 or maybe hundreds of euros. So it's not sort of thousands or millions. I then also have a few different categories of personal investing with different types of risk. For example, on the sort of less risky side, I've got exchange traded funds. Those are via the bank that I use, so the Dutch bank. And with those exchange traded funds, I'll use some of the money from my investment accounts and my savings account and put that into these investments. And I invest using themes. So those ETFs, I will look and see, firstly, if it has a theme on climate change. That's a theme I'm passionate about. So for example, water and the Sustainable Water Fund from Robeco is one. There's low carbon funds, which invest in mid-size companies around the world, but who have a low carbon footprint. And also some of the impact funds, so investing in impact pioneers, usually via quite traditional financial services providers here in Europe. So those ETFs or exchange traded funds, usually, or all of them that I have this water, low carbon, or impact theme. So that's one piece. Another piece that has more risk associated with it is crowdfunding. So again, to sort of try and support startups and companies who are really very early days and need that often that sort of initial capital impact that they can't access from traditional banks, usually because it's very innovative. I use crowdfunding platforms to invest in those companies. There's Crowdcube and Investor. And there, what I look for again is a theme. So the theme that I invest in is low carbon energy and renewables. So, for example, it could be wind energy in Scotland. There's a solar park in Germany. There's another one in the Netherlands. There's even a night train I've recently invested in. And there you can get a share in that company via the platform or a bond. And to give you a bit of an idea, the share that for one is usually in the region of €50. To have a bond, and with the share, you have a share in the company. For a bond is like an IOU. So you give the company the money and then they'll pay you an interest payment at a regular cadence, so usually every quarter, for example, and then you get your money back at the end. And with the bond, the minimum investment is usually about €250. And I think most recently, actually, the investment I made there was in a company that makes bamboo loo roll. So it's sometimes just fun to have a look and see what's on there. There's definitely more risk associated with it. I have had a few of the companies. There's probably 20 or 30 of them that I invest in via these platforms. And I have had a few of them which have gone bankrupt. I've lost my money. So it tends to be quite small and thematic using those platforms. So that's on the more risky end. And then just one very final piece to mention. About 2 weeks ago, I decided for the first time ever to buy Bitcoin. So I also have a tiny amount of Bitcoin as well. And that, again, was just part of that diversification. So that, yeah, gives a little bit of a feeling.
Excellent. Charlie, same question. Oh, Charlie, you're on mute.
Well, it's really interesting to hear Rebecca's way of investing, because I believe she has way more years of experience in the game. I'm much more recent in this, and maybe it will also speak to our audience for the ones who have never done it. Turns out, in as I was telling you, that first there's this issue that a lot of people can't invest to start with, and thanks Rebecca for highlighting it. I think we hear people talking about investment as if it was a natural thing. It's not necessarily natural. It doesn't mean that it's not accessible with small amounts, but of course there's this principle that you should have a buffer, a safety net, and that for that reason, we do not encourage anyone to invest in, let's say, unlisted equity if they don't have that safety net. And the exact amount of the safety net can depend a lot on people, but it's anything from 3 months to 12 months of salary, depending on your financial stability. And of course, there's this principle that people will try and acquire their first residence. And a lot of these investments have long-term maturities, so they don't really make sense if you're gonna buy your primary residence in the next 2-3 years, there's no reason to invest in a life insurance or in unlisted equity. So we would invite you to really focus more on your saving accounts, your current accounts, making sure there's enough money there to make up for anything that comes along the way. That being said, and the principles that I just stated are the reason why I'm quite new to financing, because I started working 10 years ago, and it's only been about a year that I've started to make financial investments, and they're very modest. And to remember, in the previous question, I answered that French people are investing 3 ways, each representing 1/3 of their financial investments. One was the saving accounts and current accounts. The other one was life insurance. And the third one was the direct stakes and debt. So mostly unlisted equity, but also a little bit of traditional listed equities and obligations through funds, or we have specific vehicles for that in France, which have more acronyms we can add to our soup. But basically in France, it's called a PEA or a CTO, which is the vehicle you use to make those direct investments. But it's not accessible. I mean, it's not something that most people do, and it's a little bit something of people who have enough financial resources. And wishing you to be already there. That's not the case for me. That I haven't started to make those investments, but I've already started to look at it. So how does it work for me? It's 90% current and saving accounts. So this safety net, mostly the saving accounts, products that I was telling you about, the Livret A and the LDDS. They have very modest returns, but I know they finance things that are not opposed to my values, so social housing and energy efficiency projects, and that's what I like about them. Then when it comes to current accounts, where do I have my money? There's the question of which bank I'm banking with, and I started with BNP Paribas when I was maybe 17 years old. But since then, and because of the research we've been doing together and for other reasons, I have learned that BNP is a large contributor to fossil fuel financing. Actually, the first bank in France for fossil fuel financing. Of course, there's questions of proportionality and so on, and French banks have been making some efforts on their fossil fuel exposure, but still, it's been an important compass for me to look at fossil fuel exposure when it comes to my investments. And this is the reason why I moved away from BNP. At the moment, I am banking with LCL, which I'm not sure about their exact fossil fuel exposure, but I would not recommend them for that reason. I am banking with them because they were the only ones to offer a mortgage when I bought my primary residence. And this is where also I have my saving accounts. But on top of that, what I've started to do is bank with a neo-French bank. It's called Greengot. And the reason why I started to work with them is because they are limiting their fossil fuel exposure to almost zero. And my belief is that they have zero fossil fuel exposure. When I say belief, is because they have 0% of fossil fuel direct exposure. And because they contribute to financiarization, they have a little bit of indirect fossil fuel exposure. But I guess that's a topic for another session. The reason why I bank with Greengot is because they have a 4% cashback on my organic groceries at my local cooperative called Biocop. And they also have a 1 to 2% cashback on my train tickets. And those were attractive aspects of their offer. But Greengot are not the only green bank to have your current accounts with. In France, we also have the NEF and the Crédit Coopératif, The problem with NEF is that they don't have a current account yet, and with Credit Cooperative is that they belong to a large banking group called BPC, which also have a fossil fuel exposure. And then just to quickly finalize, so the saving account and the current account, in my case, represent the bulk of my financial investments, 90% of it. And then finally, I have 10% on my life insurance, which I recently opened with Gringotts, which the life insurance is basically a product that you want to have for long term. It's not very liquid, and you have a fiscality associated to it. So rather high taxes, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's a flat tax of 30%. I need to look into details because it depends on for how long you detain the life insurance. But if you have it for more than 7 years, then the taxes are going to be reduced. And for that product, it's about 15 funds that are constantly rotating. So I've already seen, since I joined, there was a fund that was phased out and a new fund that was phased in. And those funds are quite sustainable. They were meticulously selected by the fund manager, by Gringotts. But they tend to cause a little bit financiarization, because when I look at the funds themselves, they have a lot of banks in it, like BNP, the one that I was criticizing. And then there's a very important aspect to that. An aspect that I find very interesting is that some impact experts say that the secondary markets, investing in the secondary market through funds, have little to no impact on the real economy. It's a topic I'm looking at, but I'm not sure I fully agree with that statement. I still think that not owning fossil fuel is a great thing. And then finally, and sorry for being that long on that question, I have a few direct investments. I'm saying a few. I have actually one direct investment, which is with my energy provider, my electricity provider, which is a cooperative. It's called Enercop. And I was surprised to see that they were offering me a 4.5 interest rate last year. I wasn't expecting any return. I have this share in the cooperative because it's a mandatory requirement of joining the cooperative and being a client there. But I will be looking into expanding my exposure to this cooperative because I really salute their work. They're sourcing 100% of our electricity through French renewable energy projects. And then I am looking into, similarly to Rebecca, I'm looking into expanding my exposure to direct investments. And I've started to look at an equity and debt crowdfunding platform called lita.co, where they have plenty of products that they already selected, plenty of companies they already selected. So projects like recycling and reuse. And they have tens of different projects. I haven't really started yet to invest, but that's the next thing to do on the list for me.
Oh, well, thank you, Rebecca and Charlie. That's quite a lot of information. I've picked a few thoughts on what you said, but I think, yeah, obviously investing is for many people, a luxury, is based on disposable income, and in tight times it might not be an option, but hopefully even at small level it's possible to keep some savings. But yeah, I hear lots of acronyms, lots of options, spanning from very small investment to very large investment if it's your own home, very different product, which all have different type of risk, and that goes to the rule 101, which is diversification,